I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, everybody, welcome. West Point, Mississippi, home of Mossy Oak. Lanny, this is going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, talking about black bears.
It is, but before we, bear with me here a second.
I saw that coming.
I think he planned that last night.
100%.
I need to make sure I put out a little announcement. It's time, guys, if you're riding in the road and you see a turtle in the road, don't run over there.
No, don't run over him.
I hit one the other night. My wife has just now started speaking to me again. I didn't see it, and I hit it, and it was a horror scene, as you might imagine. It was in our driveway of all places.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you ran over it in your driveway? How fast were you going in the driveway?
But I didn't see it. But this is the point. But I'm just, they're crossing the roads now, and we've got these biologists here with us. They're going to lay eggs, I guess is what they're doing. And Dana's nodding her head there. So anyway, I just want to throw that out.
So watch out for the turtles.
Yeah, I moved one out of the road on the way to the farm the other day.
And keep your trapping game going right now, right? Got some poults running around.
Yeah, we hope we're starting to see some. Yeah.
Yeah. Bernie White just actually texted me a picture of several of his trapping. He's having some successful trapping going on right now. So that's what made me think about it.
Yeah, that's good. Dudley, what's going on in your world?
Just playing in the woods. We made some dewberry ice cream the other day at the office.
It was delicious.
It was good.
It tasted really low fat too.
It was mostly heavy cream. So
it was delicious.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm looking over here on our guest couch, and we've got Anthony Ballard. We have been trying to get somebody to come talk to us about bears in Mississippi for a couple of... We didn't even think...
At least 2 years.
So we were so happy when you got the job and you answered an email. We were just like, oh my gosh.
There is somebody out there. Yeah. That's right.
So we thought this was like some kind of covert operation going on. But so Anthony Ballard, we are really excited to have you here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and tell us your position with the state, please.
So the technical description is the Black Bear Program Leader.
Yeah.
So I've been in this just over a year now. I had 2 predecessors. The bear program proper, I guess, went over to Wildlife and Fisheries from the museum in 2002. And so a lot of people don't realize we've been doing bear research now for 20 years. And so,
wow.
Part of what I'm trying to do is like you said, just kind of get out there more and tell that story that, stuff we've already been doing for a while.
So sitting next to him, we've got Dr. Dana Morin. She's from Mississippi State. She was here.
Yeah, we've already had her on before.
Yeah, and she talked about coyotes. We got more feedback on that. Everybody just loved her.
Yeah, she's great.
And we're so glad to get her back over here. We're eventually going to do one with her on bobcats.
Oh, that'll be a good one.
Yeah, it will be. I think it would be. So Dana, tell us a little bit about your title has carnivore in it.
Yes. So I'm an assistant professor at Mississippi State University, and I'm a carnivore ecologist. So I've worked with lots of species across North America and a little bit internationally with different carnivore species. And right now I have a lot of projects or a pretty big focus on black bears across parts of the eastern U.S., from Maine to Michigan, down through Mississippi and North Carolina, where I just was last week. But I also have done a lot of work with coyotes and a lot of work on bobcats and occasionally some of the smaller carnivores like gray foxes and weasels, and occasionally accidentally trap some skunks. So, which is fun.
And I'll add to that, you've done some work with soils and things like that. Bears all over the world, fire stuff, and some marine stuff too.
Yeah.
Golly.
So I have I like doing math. I like the population modeling. And so where most of my ecological focus is on carnivores and my knowledge base of the ecology is on carnivores, a lot of the models that we use for building out bear models or coyote models or anything like that, we can actually apply to other species. So I've gotten pulled into some different species like that. I get to ask really stupid questions about, like, is an abalone like a snail like this, or does it do this?
Right.
And things like that. So, so it's just the opportunity to get to work with some really interesting species at times.
Nice.
Awesome. True or false? You recently petted a possum, not realizing it was a possum.
It was not actually recently. It was back in college, but yes, it was. I was sitting on a friend's deck after a long night of cooking jambalaya and everything that goes with it. And I sat down on the deck in an Adirondack chair, and I thought his cat was walking up from behind to be pet, and I put my hand out and pet it, and heard the hiss as I was making contact.
Let me guess, they feed their cats on the porch. And that's probably why that possum was there.
I believe they did, yes.
That's hilarious.
We're glad to have you here.
I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
And guys, our listeners, Mississippi has a rich heritage and tradition with the black bear. And, it's some great stories all the way back to maybe the greatest of the stories is the story of Teddy Roosevelt coming down here and hunting with Holt Collier and trying to, the way the whole teddy bear was started. But that's a fantastic story. But could you kind of take us back? I'm looking at Anthony. Could you take us back? What did it look like back in the late 1800s or over in the Delta and with the bear population?
Yeah, and that's such an interesting story. Like a lot of people think, a lot of people are familiar with the teddy bear story and kind of take that for granted and recite the story like we do, those well-known tales. But you think about, if you're going to take the president of the United States somewhere to hunt, it better be a good spot. You know what I mean? Like he could go anywhere in the U.S., really probably anywhere in the world that he wanted to go bear hunt, and it was to right here in the Mississippi Delta. And so it speaks to the quality of habitat and the abundance of bears that were in that area. They were a very ubiquitous, well-established and economically important species at the time. And, that's something that I try to include in my presentations and stuff because it's an important thing to impress upon people, not only like, oh, the teddy bear story happened, that was in Mississippi, that's cool, but to just say like how much of a part of the culture and part of the hunting culture that it was back during that time. And then you think about, how different the habitat looked back then. What we see now as the Mississippi Delta, so much ag land and very little bottomland hardwood, it looked nothing like that in those days. And so, a lot of the agriculture that's there now, it was all just huge old growth bottomland hardwoods that was ideal habitat for bears. And so, with those two things kind of, the over harvesting and then the habitat loss that came in the following, like in the early 1900s, it really paints a picture of just how devastating or how devastated that the population became, in those next few decades.
So I guess they had to just retreat to the land around the Mississippi River where there was trees and cane brakes. And
things. I mean, it's pretty tough to make a living on bare dirt, and so they had to, the habitat, but then also, there were no regulations, there was no wildlife and fisheries, there was no federal agencies, there were no such thing as endangered species, all those things that we think of now. You go deer hunting, you have to abide by the regulations. You have any species that you take, there's some type of regulation there. And there was none of that. How many animals you could take at that time was just according to how much skill you had at taking that animal, like how much you could physically remove. And that's why it's so, that conservation wildlife model that was formed, that's why that's so important, because it's brought so many species back from the brink of extinction, including things that we take for granted now, like the eastern wild turkey and the white-tailed deer, and more recently the American alligator. And that's kind of the thread that I'm trying to put through all of this is, that's the same trajectory that we hope the black bear follows as well.
Nice.
These cane brakes that they talk about, they sound like they were just vast areas of just cane. And what about that was so important for the bears?
Well, I mean, a lot of the habitat along the river, especially in those bottomland hardwood areas, is denning habitat. And so, we see even now, in some of the research that we've done or the den checks that we've done, and we'll kind of get into what that is later, but, they'll clip pieces of cane off and actually make, nests on the ground and that kind of thing. But another really important aspect was that old growth timber. So even now there's cypress in the Delta that are hundreds of years old. Yeah. And, over time that you have branches that break off or spots that rot out, and the tree is perfectly healthy, but you have these cavities that start to form, and that ends up being really important denning habitat, especially for females that are having cubs.
That's the question I was going to ask. In the Delta, think about like denning habitat. You'd think you'd have to have more undulation in the land and kind of cracks and crevices, but they're just going into existing tree cavities.
Yeah, I mean, especially along the river where
Yeah.
you've got a lot of that old growth, not old growth technically, but those really old cypress trees that have never been harvested, because most of the time they're not accessible or really merchantable that much. And, you'll have, tree cavities, especially along the Delta that are anywhere from 20 to 50 or 60 feet high that the bears will climb up into and den for the winter.
How cool is that? And then you did say they'll make nests on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that's one cool thing that I've sort of noticed talking to other bear biologists in other parts of the country. Arkansas, for instance, in the mountain ranges up there, the things that you look at and kind of cue in on to see where a den might be is completely different there than it would be here or even in South Mississippi.
Right.
And so it's interesting how creative they can be and different places they can find to make a den.
Well, typically when you think about a den, you think of something underground, and you go to digging in the Delta, you might get washed out, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and that's
So
another
that's-
important point. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's exactly it. So when we think about bears will really den almost anywhere in most areas. And the one limitation that they've kind of identified is that in areas that flood, because the cubs may not survive the flooding activity. So that's where they'll start to key in on things like these cypress trees that protect them. But we see the same thing you're talking about with those cane breaks. When you looked at like the extirpation of southeastern black bears across most of their ranges, the areas of refuge were like the Pocosin swamps in North Carolina and the swamps and some of these areas that were they're nesting in root balls, really, like in Florida. So it was the areas that were less desirable for humans to be in because females do still have that they have that desire to move away from danger when they're denning, and that was what was really kind of left. So
and again, I'm obviously a neophyte on the bear knowledge. So they're denning in there, but are they hibernating in there? Do our bears hibernate?
That's always a point of contention. I see you laughing. I knew that was going to come up.
Yeah.
So here's what I try to. This is like the least confrontational answer I can give. I like to use the word denning because hibernation is inaccurate, but because it brings to mind a very deep sleep that lasts the entire winter. So when people say hibernate, that's
exactly what I'm thinking about.
And the fact of the matter is that doesn't describe what bears in Mississippi or most of the Deep South actually do. We've got, I think, close to 19 bears right now that are collared, about half and half male and female. And what we've seen over the years is, a lot of times the females will den more often and they'll den for longer periods of time, particularly the pregnant females, because that's when they have their cubs. But the males, sometimes they'll den in multiple locations and they'll bounce between different den sites. And sometimes they won't den at all and they'll stay out for the entire winter and they'll just, hit one deer feeder after the other and never really den at all. So, when you get into that, it's a very nuanced and kind of complicated issue, and it's very difficult to make a blanket statement about what bears do in the wintertime.
yeah.
Sure.
So there's a physiological definition that's like a little old school of what hibernation actually is, and almost no black bears actually do that. So, but they definitely den, and and some will den for longer periods, and some will go into more extended periods of torpor. Or like lethargy, where they're sleeping for multiple days. They might, especially if it's cold, they'll get up and move around a little bit to generate a little heat, but then they'll nest right back down. But the two things that trigger that are temperatures and a lack of food resources. So when you think about the Southeast, there's kind of food available all the time.
Yes.
So the only reason you'd have to den is if you're a female that needs to gestate cubs for 2 months. So yeah.
Makes
So
sense.
I know we're talking
Yeah,
about
yeah.
bears in Mississippi. So up north, where it's colder and there's probably less food in the winter, they're more apt to den.
They are, but even on those den checks, like when you go in on them, the females wake up, like they there.
Hello, who?
Yeah. And
I've yet to do a den check where the female wasn't staring directly at me and whatever I was doing.
And even like I was speaking to my colleagues in Minnesota the other day, and they were saying it was a really warm winter this year, and they had bears running. Like when they were doing that, when they would normally have
But
bears
they
that were
weren't doing
den
den checks when it was 80 degrees outside.
No, that's I don't think it
Big
ever
as
gets
a
updated.
den, typically.
Man, it depends. We've had some where the openings, so we've had some in slash piles. We've had some like in the base of trees that were kind of rotting out. Some went into one this last spring that it was all I could do to wedge my body sideways into the cavity. And then when I got down, I basically had just enough room. So the female filled up the whole base of the den. So I had nowhere to step. So this was in a tree. And so I had basically enough room to kind of squat and reach to my side to what I was doing, but it was really tight.
So you're going in this cavity and that mama bear's in there.
Yeah, you need to explain how you get in the tree first.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can be an issue in itself. But so typically what we do, and to kind of back up a little bit, the den checks, the reason that we do these is to monitor reproduction. And so if we're trying to put together puzzle pieces of what a population is and where it might be heading, is one of the biggest things of that is to be reproduction. So are your females healthy? Are they having the cubs that you expect them to have? How many cubs are they having? Are those cubs in good health? All those things we're trying to monitor during that season, and you can kind of pick up trends over the years as to is your reproduction doing what you expect it to. And so every season, late February is when we try to locate all of our collared females, and then we'll actually go to the physical den site. So again, sometimes it's on the ground, sometimes it's in a tree, and figure out how we're going to approach it, which way the wind might be, trails to get in, all that stuff is done on the front end. And then the day of, that consists of actually approaching the den, darting the female, sedating her, and then taking the cubs, working them up, which will be a lot of physical measurements, weights, that kind of thing. We put pit tags in, which is basically what people know as a microchip. And so that way, if we catch that bear again anytime in the future, we can scan that pit tag and we'll know, in that case, we'll know a time and a date that bear was actually born in a location. And so it's a good way to track all of that. So, these den checks have been done for 20 years plus here in Mississippi, and then, are done pretty commonly any place that has a population of black bears.
I got to think, though, if there's a den 20 foot up or 20 feet up in a cypress tree, be a pretty hairy situation no matter how much information you had. Like, you just take an extension ladder and hop on up there and bail in?
No, that would actually make me more nervous to be on an extension ladder. I've done that before, and I don't ever want to do it again. But what we do is, like I said, most of the time it's in a cypress. Sometimes it's an oak or a sycamore, but we've got a big slingshot on a pole, on a fiberglass pole, and we'll shoot a weight that's attached to a line. It's like a thin, waxy line. And once that goes over the branch that we're wanting to climb, which can be an event all in itself. So once we get that over, then we use that line, we call it throw line. Once we tie that line and actually pull our main climbing rope over. So what we'll do to kind of prepare is we'll set those lines first, tie them off, and then the day of we'll actually tie the rope, because the actual climbing rope, we're real particular about that because your life literally depends on it. So we don't bring those out until the day of. And so the day it's time to do that den check, we'll tie that rope, pull it over, and then we use climbing equipment to actually climb the rope.
Like an ascender or something?
Yeah, so I use foot ascenders. There's one that hits right about knee level, and then one on the ankle on the other side. Yeah. And
up you go.
Chest harness, and up you go.
And then you peek over in the cavity.
Yeah, we got to go do something.
And mama's in there.
Richie.
Well, and so when you first peek over into a new cavity, you may be nose to nose with the bear, or that bear might be 30 feet down on the ground inside the tree.
Oh,
and you don't know that until you peek over and look. And so it can be, it's always a fun surprise.
Yeah.
We had a fun time. We have a couple students that'll go out and help the bear team for MDWFP. And Mississippi State can be a little sensitive about risk to students. And so, so we had to do we had to get
for
them.
some reason.
Yeah, for some reason. So
it
we had
didn't
to
used
get them,
to be that way.
They're starting to have a lot of fun with the stuff I bring them. So we had to get some training for them, like some ropes training and climbing training. And so I went to my dean and said, we need to do this ropes training. And and he took it to the risk assessment team, which he's part of. And he said he was explaining to them how they needed to get all this climbing. They're like, well, what, like assuming the risk was the actual climbing. And he said, no, after that, then they said, well, why are they doing that? He goes, well, after that, they descend down into the tree to the bear.
Yeah. They go check the bears.
That changed the risk assessment a little bit.
Details.
Yeah.
There's some things you might want to leave out of an explanation. I don't know how you got that approved.
Yeah.
I have a very good dean, who loves research.
Yeah,
so
good for him. Let's hit the horns for the dean.
Yeah.
Dr. Berger, thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. West.
Oh, well, yeah,
Yeah,
of
of
course
course.
he's going to approve it. So The whole thing kind of fascinates me how y'all do this. But what I'd like to do is, Ricky Flint told me a few days ago that at one time that he said, I can remember there were less than 100 bears in the state. And where are we now? Do y'all know how many we have?
Well, funny you should mention that. That's the number one question that I always get asked, and rightfully so. The estimation that we have right now is very outdated. It's 15 plus years old. And so what we're doing right now, and actually, Dana Morin and MSU has often operated as kind of our research arm, whether it be white-tailed deer or black bear or basically any other critter in the state. And what we're doing right now is gathering data to try to update that estimate. And so what we'll do is, we're catching bears, we're collaring bears. Their students are out doing field work as well. And then once we get all of that data compiled, genetic data, movement data, habitat use, all of that, then she does her math magician stuff and comes up with a model, all of her math stuff that I don't understand or want to. And that's kind of the research component. And then they'll provide us and really the rest of the state and the rest of the country with a good updated estimate of where our population is.
See these people? When the clock strikes 5, it's not the end. It's just the beginning. They have to do these things. They have to do those things. Enter the all-new LS Tractor MT2 and MT2E, a relentless force of innovation. Redesigned with a new hood and cab built for comfort and visibility, with enhanced lifting capacity to get the job done. Making these people the ones everyone else calls those people. Visit your local LS Tractor dealer today.
Moultrie has pioneered the game management category. Today, Moultrie is one of the best-selling brands of feeders and seeders in the world, and they continue to innovate with new technology that gamekeepers will rely on. Moultrie products are always field-tested and designed for hunters by hunters, combining forward-thinking innovation with time-tested practicality. Moultrie, first in feeders since 1979. All right, so guys, Moultrie is offering our listeners a 15% site-wide discount at MoultrieFeeders.com. Use code Mossy Oak with a capital M, Mossy Oak, at MoultrieFeeders.com and get that 15% discount. So there's a Facebook page that I've enjoyed following across the state where people post, hey, I saw this bear, that bear. That's got to be super helpful to you because that's getting feedback from people that you might not normally would have heard from.
And I never thought it would be that. Number one, I never thought it would grow like it has, and I never thought it would be as useful as it ended up being. So back, during the last 20 plus years, most of our research has concentrated in either the North Delta, which, Bolivar County area along that river, and then the South Delta, so like Warren, Issaquena, Sharkey counties. And that's been sort of the breadbasket of where a lot of our research data has always come from. So once you move outside of that, you don't have those landowners and camps that you have a long-standing relationship that you've always worked with, and we've got to access private lands. And so, when this Facebook page first came up, the thought was to capture some of these sightings and stuff that people have seen on their game cameras that are not necessarily being reported to our website like we ask people to do. But as it kind of evolved, it became a tool for our team and for, to pass on to MSU students that were in the field to make connections with people. If we're looking at concentrating in a certain area, it's set up to make the to post the picture and then the county. So if I've got a picture in a county and then I've got a date that's a timestamp on the bottom of that picture, I can reach out to that person and say, hey, we're doing this research. Would you mind if I come on? Very seldomly have I been told no. So it was, that was one utility that I didn't necessarily predict that has been a huge, probably 95+% of the properties that we've been able to access for research has been a result of some kind of social media interaction.
Yeah.
And so it's been a huge help in that
great.
regard too.
Yeah.
What's the name of that page? It's
Mississippi Black Bears.
Yeah, Dudley, you would enjoy it.
Oh, I'm on it.
Yeah.
And that's also a good way to educate the public.
Yeah,
when they
100%.
see something and make a comment that's probably may not be correct. That's an opportunity for the public to learn.
Right. Yeah, and it was originally kind of designed to catch those sightings, but then it's also been an avenue to put our success and our research out there And, when people see that kind of thing, they see updates and success in those endeavors, especially in something exciting as black bears, they'll be a part of it, and so it encourages people to follow and to kind of follow along and stay updated on things. And it's just been a huge help. It's been awesome.
It's been really interesting to see like how the range is updated based on all of those sightings too. Like it's been an incredible amount of information.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And you may have somebody, and there may be a bear with an ear tag or something, or it's identifiable. Yeah. And then somebody 20 miles away posts the same bear, so you can learn from that as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we recently had a bear that skipped town and went all the way down to Louisiana. And we've gotten pictures all the way down, actually, on the Louisiana Black Bear Report, which is another Facebook page that's sort of similar. The bear that just went down to around there has been posted on there.
Oh, wow.
So it's been like most of our bears that we have collared or tagged have showed back up on that page.
He's going to be like an influencer.
Yeah. He has his own following.
So, Dana, how many do we have?
So, yeah, that's my job. We're not quite there yet, but I can tell you how we're getting there.
You'll have to bear with us.
Yes.
Oh, there he goes again.
Dad joke of the day. You're welcome.
So we've been collecting samples from around different parts of Mississippi and updating it somewhat based on like the range distribution changes that we find from the observations that Anthony's been getting. But what we're doing is we're using a really common method for estimating black bear population size and densities, and it's called spatial capture-recapture. It's a population model that we use, and the way we do it with bears is we create what we call hair snare corrals. So we take barbed wire and we wrap it around multiple trees. And then we hang a bag with some day-old donuts in it. And the bears come by and they leave a tuft of hair when they pass through the barbed wire. And then we go through and collect it. We're able to identify the individual that left it, just like forensics from the genetics that's in the hair follicle. And so that allows us to distinguish different individuals. So instead of just like, oh, we have a lot of reports of bears here, or I've seen a lot of bears on this camera trap, we can tell with the hair snares, is that one individual, is that 5 individuals? And we can start to build detection probabilities and then build our population models off of that. So we've been doing that for the last few years in the Delta region. We expanded out to southeastern Mississippi last year, and then this year we're going to be doing Southwest Mississippi. And once we have that, we'll be able to, once we get all that genotyped, we'll be able to get a pretty decent population estimation and update it for the state, hopefully. So and spatially explicit too, so we'll know hopefully how many bears in the Delta, how many bears in the Southwest. The other cool thing that we get from that is we're able to look at how related individuals are, or what populations they came from. So black bears in Mississippi is a really interesting place to work with them, because a lot of places where you have recovering black bear populations, they augmented those populations, those low populations, with bears from Minnesota or Manitoba, right? They were moving bears to try to build the population back up. Mississippi actively chose not to do that. And so the population recovery here has been natural, and a lot of that is from immigration from other states. So we'll be able to identify from that hair sample, not just its bear number 652, but bear number 652 is maybe a quarter of his genealogy comes from Arkansas and 3/4 comes from Louisiana, or we can even do parentage at some point if we get enough samples and enough related individuals. So it's really going to help us kind of build out the immigration rates as well, so that we can predict how the population will grow in the future.
So is that what we're seeing when we're seeing these bears on the move? Because it seems like once a year there'll be one moving east out of the Delta. Are they establishing new home ranges? Is it breeding season? I mean, what are these guys or girls
It's guys.
doing? Yeah. What are these guys doing?
Well, and that's another thing that I kind of wanted to talk that's time specific or time sensitive, I guess, to this time of the year.
Yeah.
Because we've had our den emergence, right? So the sows that have yearlings. So to back up a little bit, cubs stay with the sow for about 1.5 years, so 16 to 18 months. So they have the cubs in the den. They spend the whole first year. They'll den again next year, and then when they come out, they'll disperse from the female sometime between den emergence and breeding season, which is July or August. All right, so during this time, you have a lot of younger bears that are dispersing out. The females generally stay in the same general area. The males might go for a very long way to establish their own home range. And so same principle as what you would see a spiked deer that walks out on a food
Right.
plot in the middle of 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He doesn't know any better yet. And so you have many times long range dispersal. So when you see bears that show up in the middle of downtown wherever, or, like the bear that came up in Destin, Florida on the beach last summer, that made big news. Anytime you see something like that, almost always it's going to be a young male that's just out of his own for the first time, and he's trying to figure out, where to go and how to be a bear. And so it's, what we kind of try to drive home in a lot of our, educational pushes is, here's how you cohabitate with bears. Here's how to avoid conflicts. Here's what you do if you see a bear, and kind of passing on some of that knowledge as well, because, this time of year is when you're going to start seeing those males disperse, and they're going to be showing up in places that are going to be a surprise to people sometimes.
I remember about 25 years ago when I lived in Cleveland, Mississippi, it made the front page of the paper. There was a black bear in a tree in the front yard of the Rosedale courthouse. And everybody, went,
Yep, case in point. And there'll be people walking around with rifles, and the local news wanting to interview people, and the police chief talking to, it's amazing how sensational it can be when something like that happens, and people just lose their mind.
So are there different subspecies of black bears like, deer and turkeys have?
Technically, yes.
Technically, yes.
Yeah. There's the Louisiana black bear is a recognized subspecies, but and then there's some subspecies in Florida. I mean, at one point they were split into many, many, many different subspecies, but like with the onset of genetics, kind of the relationships among those populations is a little more clear.
Okay,
They're traveling. That's right.
Yeah.
So more than 100?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
I'm confident. I'm confident in that one.
Yeah,
There's definitely more than the estimate was from 15 years ago.
Yeah, we've got almost 20 with collars on right now. And I think since in the past year, there's been 24, 25 caught. Yeah, there's a lot more than 100.
And so when we think about like a black bear population too, they kind of percolate was what we say. So they stay at these really low levels in these populations, and then they'll hit like an inflection point where the population really starts to take off. And it has to do with the way females tolerate each other, essentially. So the males kind of get pushed out, and they're making these crazy dispersal movements or even just migratory movements, trying to look and explore different territories. Females they're philopatric, meaning the females will be very tolerant of their female young staying in the same territory or just moving immediately adjacent and sharing some of those resources. So the females, and then the reproduction, which is what we consider truly an established population, as having females with cubs or females reproducing there, they're much slower to expand on that front. So, and they'll tolerate each other to quite a high level of density. The population in Mobile Bay in Alabama is about almost all of their females essentially overlap in their home ranges and interact.
Okay. So we're probably going to be kicking little Dudley out of the house soon, but the girls can stick around for a while.
Well, it's one of the reasons population expansion is so interesting and kind of complex with black bears. When you think about how quickly coyotes moved across the eastern U.S. relatively, right, a couple decades, but black bears have been slower to expand. Coyotes are territorial; they push everybody out, right? They don't want to share their territory with any of their young, so they're kicking them out as soon as they hit subadult. Whereas the female black bears can really establish a high level of density before they're going to start. Dispersal is dangerous, so before they're going to start making their female young disperse.
And they have one litter every 2 years?
Yeah, they're
roughly?
biennial reproducers, roughly,
gotcha.
yeah. If they don't, in areas where, and this might happen here too, especially in the Delta, right? If there are areas where they lose their cubs they'll reproduce the next year. It's just that the presence of the cubs keeps them from breeding.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything about like habitat change that's been happening in the last 20 years that's helped the populations improve a little bit? Or are you guys thinking that? Or
I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I wouldn't say there's been any huge changes in the habitat per se. I would just say, like Dana said, and this is sort of anecdotal, what we're saying here, but just from observations that we've made, it does seem like we're approaching that inflection point.
Okay.
And just, not necessarily because the habitat or anything else is so much better. Now, I will say that there's a pretty strong case to be made that the presence of feeders and the abundance of feeders, wildlife feeders on the landscape, do help, because you have all the feeders that are going on the landscape I mean, y'all know as well as I do, usually that late September, October, sometimes, as early as August, and you've got all the feeders and cameras that go into the woods. And that same time period is when the bears start to go into what's called hyperphagia, where they're trying to eat as much as they possibly can. So we know that, physical fitness can directly impact reproductive potential and overall health of the female. And so there's a case to be made there that it may be, influencing denning behavior, and then also, influencing reproduction possibly.
Yeah, but it's interesting, like it's kind of counterintuitive with reproduction at times too. There was a study in Wisconsin that looked at where they have feeding pretty much from like April through the hunting season. And they found that what we call the cellular aging of female bears that were denning was more advanced if they had more corn signatures in their diet. They were looking at the hair and doing stable isotope analysis. So a way of looking at what's the composition of your diet. And so that's all fancy words, but what that really means is they were finding that there was a poor physiological condition essentially of black bears that were eating more corn or hitting more feeders or agriculture. And they related to that fact that they didn't need to hibernate as early, or they didn't need to den as early because they still had food available to them. And that hibernation rest is actually really important for their physiological, like especially if you can imagine gestating a litter of cubs and then having to care for them while you're still in a den.
So it's creating a false sense of...
It could be. I mean, it's encouraging movement, which is interesting, right? Like when the fall, like all the reports we hear are generally feeders, but the only evidence I know of like how it affects reproduction has been that it might be negatively affecting the actual physiological health of the females.
So Anthony,
Too many carbs.
Yeah.
What was it? Hyperphagia?
My diet too, yeah.
Hyperphagia?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that what it was? I think I might have some of that.
Just means stuff in your face.
Yeah.
I do at the tailgate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Anthony, do you, kind of looking in your crystal ball, do you think that one day we might wake up and there'd be some kind of little mini bear season in Mississippi?
The batteries in my crystal ball went out a long time ago. But I will say, I mean, it's, in my opinion, I don't think it's a matter of if, I think it's just a matter of when. Louisiana was in the same boat. And like you said, historically their population has been augmented more than ours has been. But I mean, essentially the Mississippi River it's a barrier, but it's not a huge barrier. And so, again, most of the bears that we've gotten have come from those areas. And it's only a matter of time before we reach a point where, where we've reached our population goals and we can implement some management strategies in the form of hunting.
Yeah. I think it's important to recognize that we, as a carnivore ecologist, we're often talking about recovering carnivore populations because a lot of them were decimated across a lot of North America. But at some point in that recovery comes the management part, right? So that's where we have to shift gears and recognize that black bears are our most effective tool for managing black bear populations within a realm that makes us able to coexist with them in a good manner is harvest. So I can't imagine a situation where you would recover a black bear population to not then at least be thinking in the future like that. You're going to need to think about how to manage them via harvest.
Sure. Yeah. Conservation, not preservation.
Yes.
Yep.
Is there any data out there on how black bears get along with the increasing feral pig population?
Well, I wish they would eat them. That'd be great.
There has been a fair amount of document. It's anecdotal. I don't know if you've actually read anything that says that, but
I haven't, no.
Okay. Well, there's just anecdotally, I've seen, several game camera pictures and still photos and that kind of stuff of bears eating pigs. It's probably not to any appreciable amount. But as far as the interaction, I'm really not sure. I know they share a lot of the same corridors, because a lot of them are sharing those poorly drained, travel corridors, rivers and creeks and that kind of thing, and watersheds. But as far as direct interaction, I really don't know what the exact relationship there would be.
Okay.
Let's go back to the whole thing of you crawling in these dens is pretty interesting. And
Yeah,
so you've
super
got about
interesting.
20 bears you've got collars on right now that you're monitoring. And
Yeah, and last year I think we did 6 den checks out of those. So you've got, like I said, about half and half males and females, and then roughly half of those females every year, since it's biannual, we're expecting to have cubs. And so, usually it's about a quarter of what you actually have collared if you've got a male and female distribution like that.
What's the average litter size?
2 to 3 is what
2
I'm
to 3.
generally expecting. Yeah. I think we had We had one with a single this year, but she was a 3-year-old. So that first litter that she has, so the first time they reproduce will be between 3 and 5 years old. And she was 3. So young female, we expect them to have one.
Right.
And then we had an older sow in Wilkinson County that had 3.
That's actually one of the questions one of my graduate students, Spencer Daniels, is interested in. So one of his thesis chapters, we're collaborating with state agencies across most of the East, and they all collected hair during the den checks, as Anthony did with Spencer. And we're looking at stress levels to see if what explains the variation we see in litter size across a large region.
So in healthy bear populations, black bear populations, is that a pretty typical litter size, 2 to 3?
In established populations, it's almost always 2.5. Like, so if you go like Maine, North Carolina, like it's really like once they become an established population and you've got like a harvested population where there's a pretty consistent density, they tend to hone in on that 2.5. Yeah.
You know, we did a show a few years ago with a young lady in Alabama that was Hannah Leeper. That was she was incredible at going in and getting these den and bears. And I was just amazed at how small they actually were when she was doing her weighing them and all that. They were just little bitty. Like
the Alabama bears are abnormally small. So that's actually something that that they've been discussing. Or did they talk to you about your litter, like your actual cub size?
We have talked a little bit to one of the it's not Hannah, but it's another lady that's done research that's doing research in the Mobile Basin.
Tracy Wood.
And and I don't know if anyway.
She sat here right there.
Yeah.
Okay, all right,
great.
cool.
Yeah,
I'll say it then,
Tracy
Tracy Wood. But yeah, we've actually talked a little bit, and that you say that they actually were seeing better numbers and better weights on their cubs this year than they expected to. So
great.
they were all kind of better than average and kind of relieve some a little bit of uncertainty there, but that kind of plays into the same point that we were making is, when you're doing those den checks over years, you're picking up trends. And so if you identify some kind of problem, like we said, our cub weights are not what we expect them to be at this point in development, that's going to be a problem. So is it nutritional? Is it habitat? Is it stress level? You start to like putting these pieces together where you can, hopefully adapt and make some kind of change possibly, versus just wondering one day where all their, younger age class bears are.
Are there any type of habitat management treatments that, listeners can do to improve the bear habitat? Like things that we would be doing for, blanket stuff we'd be doing for deer and turkey, like burning to increase early successional habitat, like, is there anything?
They like early successional habitat too.
Okay.
I'd say. What works for most wildlife? They're eating primarily berries and mast and hard mast, so like the same stuff that helps with that. I'd say the one thing and you've done the den checks, so you're more familiar with this, but would be thinking about how to conserve denning trees or conserve denning habitat.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, and most of that, like I said, most of those denning trees are, in those older growth trees in the Delta. But, even, outside of the Delta, what we see a lot of times are, things like slash piles. That's what a lot of the females are commonly in, or even, along a down tree or briar thicket or something like that. And so, again, anything that you would do to manage other wildlife species, deer and turkey, if you're going to increase your mast by burning or some other kind of treatment, that's always going to help. And then, creating wildlife openings, you're going to clear trees out. So that's potentially going to create denning habitat if you're in the absence of big, suitable trees with cavities and that kind of thing. So like I said, most of the stuff that you're going to do to benefit wildlife of other species is usually going to benefit bears.
Can you build like a faux bear den, create like a
wood duck box for black bears?
They tried in Alabama and they couldn't get the females to use them.
Yeah,
I bet it'd be tough.
I don't know if they got a single bear to go in there.
They did, and they tested it in a zoo and were able to get zoo bears to use it, but weren't able to get them to use it in the wild.
They're like,
Yeah.
I'm sure some of these government programs like the CSP program with, leaving snag trees or leaving these wolf trees on property lines and such.
Well, NIFWF, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, right? They fund actually a portion of our research related to regional, how their habitat restoration efforts through what they fund is hopefully improving connectivity of black bear populations and the expansion of black bear populations. So that's definitely questions that we're hoping to get at in the future. With that, we've got a big regional meeting coming up with them in the near future. But I would say, I think, and Anthony, you're better at talking about this than I am, but I think that one of the biggest things that people can do to encourage the recovery of the black bear population in a safe way is to recognize how we need to change our behaviors to coexist with bears.
Yes. Yeah. And we lean really heavily on the bearwise.org is sort of it's been put together by the Fish and Wildlife agencies in the Southeast. And it's basically put together as very easy data points, not PowerPoints, very easy bullet points. Thank you. Yeah. Jeez. Okay. Yeah, you can edit that part out. So anyway, bearwise.org. It was put together by the Southeastern Fish and Wildlife agencies, and it's really to communicate so everyone is communicating the same way, and all putting out the same points to how to live with bears. So, one of the biggest things as far as human bear conflict is reducing those anthropogenic food sources. So things like bird feeders is one that people don't think of quite as much. Barbecue grills, pet foods that are left outside, trash cans that are unsecured, just little things as simple as taking your garbage out the morning of versus the night before. Something like that can make the difference between a bear finding that and then, how do you train an animal? How do you train a dog? You get that animal to perform a certain action, and then you give it some type of positive reinforcement, right? So by leaving things out around the house, bears are they're going to avert people and structures and houses and that kind of thing. They don't want to be around that. But if they get a positive reinforcement every time they repeat that behavior, it's going to make them more apt to repeat it. And so that's why it's so important not to keep from building those habits and making it into an issue that's much harder to deal with versus just avoiding those to begin with.
Yeah, I'm thinking you could probably create an unsafe situation to where a conservation officer may have to take that bear out of the population.
Right.
If people aren't,
Yeah, and when bears get habituated like that, once you get far enough down the road, they do become sort of possessive over those food sources. They become used to it and relying on it. And that's when you can get into your unsafe situations. And unfortunately, that's when you do have some euthanizing that has to occur, because that's the only viable, situation that the only viable, avenue that can be pursued.
Yeah. They've done some research on translocating bears that become habituated, and they tend to have either low survival, or they move right back to where they were translocated from, or they just begin to cause problems in the same area. So it's really about preventing that from happening in the first place.
Yeah, from the first place.
Yeah,
so
it's really
behavior.
Yeah, the phrase they're constantly reiterating is a fed bear is a dead bear. So it's really important that we get ahead of that.
Yeah, Tennessee actually was a good case study for that. They had a big study that's probably what you're referring to, and it was like 2/3 of the bears that they relocated found their way back, and the majority of the remaining 1/3 got killed trying. Usually got hit by cars, or in there they have a season, so they got harvested by hunters. But the moral to the story is, they're almost never going to stay where they're relocated to, and even if they did, if that's a problem bear that's built up this habituation, if I trap a bear and I take him somewhere else, there's nowhere in the state that I can drop him off that he's not going to become a problem for somebody else. So I haven't solved the problem. I've just moved it.
Right.
I've just made it somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
And that's why we're really that's why it's so important to drive home, because that is absolutely the foundational part of staying away from anywhere from going down this road is to avoid it altogether.
Yeah.
I bet they are hell on a deer feeder.
Oh, I've seen them. They're they hang from them quite well.
Yeah, I was going to ask as a tree nerd that likes to plant trees, can y'all think of any way that you could keep a bear away from a tree long enough for it to, so we've kind of figured out how to keep pigs away and deer from rubbing them and eating them. But I mean, a bear, I don't know if there's a good answer to that question.
A lot of the smaller areas, another example is bee boxes. People have honey bees that they raise, honey they raise. And almost every bee box that I've ever seen in areas where bears are anywhere remotely close have electric fences around them. And that's one of the most effective ways by far. Bears do not like that electric shock, and it's a very effective tool in keeping them away from any sort of like small area like that, whether it be trees or bee boxes or even around small houses and sheds and that kind of thing. That's a really good tool.
Yeah, well, that would work. You could probably just fence off a half an acre and get some trees established and then move it over.
Mac, did you have a question?
I do. So with Tennessee, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, all having seasons to hunt bear, how much does that affect your research on the Mississippi River? How much data sharing is going on, or has there been a collared bear harvested in a Louisiana season?
Not in Louisiana. They'll have their first season this upcoming winter, but there have been several over the years that have been collared along the Mississippi, like hunting camps and stuff, that have ventured over into Arkansas and have been legally harvested over there. But Dana could probably speak more to that.
Yeah, we collaborate a lot. Obviously, the state agencies obviously speak with each other quite a bit, but we also have a regional collaboration for sharing research and genetic data in particular to get a better picture of how bears are moving around the region. But Arkansas has a season because they've had one of the most successful large carnivore recovery efforts. They started reintroducing bears to Arkansas in the 1960s and were able to very quickly reestablish that population. And so bears are commonly harvested in Arkansas. So yeah, I think we had one last year, right?
Yeah, we had one last year that was collared that went over, and it's actually a camp that is in Mississippi and Arkansas, and so the bear just crossed the river, and there was a hunter over there that got it.
So when I think about bears in Arkansas, I'm thinking about like northwest Arkansas. I'm not thinking about
the White River Basin.
Yeah, all that White River is just
okay.
So would the Louisiana 16-day season 10-tag lottery draw be a good case study for Mississippi to maybe do the same thing?
There's a lot of things that Louisiana is doing that I like. They're taking into account the fact that the Louisiana hunters are not going to be the same experience level as the Arkansas hunters, for instance. So you have a 16-day season, but there's not there's once you're issued your tag, you have that 16 days to harvest your bear, which means that you're not racing against some kind of quota, and so you're less likely to take a bear that may be a juvenile or maybe a sow with a cub. They've built in several things to try to make sure that that the hunter has as much time and ability to look at the bear, evaluate the shot, take a good shot, and be as educated as they can. They're also they have a mandatory education session that you'll have to go through for anybody that draws a tag. And so will it be the same? How similar it will be? Nobody really knows, but I do like a lot of the things they're doing because they've taken to account a lot of those things that first-time bear hunters is going to be very beneficial to them.
Yeah, I went through that with the alligator program when they had the educational part of it, and it was very enlightening.
Yeah, and there's a lot of parallels there,
yeah.
Between the alligator program and most of those, like those new hunting populations, they're going to be, pretty regionalized, and, you never want to go too hard and too fast starting off. You want to start off very conservative, very slow, and there's always room to expand. But, once you can't unpush that button. So you've got to have really good data. You've got to have really good, be able to have done your homework to say, this is definitely the amount we can safely harvest. Here's the area we need to be doing it, and get all your groundwork laid. And, to make sure that's a success and you can build on it in future years.
Lenny, I had to tell you, hunting with you, you've got your phone in your pocket. You're constantly checking onX.
Yep. Very variable key features all in those things. It really is. From the compass mode to recent imagery, it really helps you understand where you are spatially, where you're headed, where a turkey is, where he was. It's a heck of a tool to use in the spring woods.
I didn't realize that they're updating these maps every couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'd have never known about that clear cut that you were hunting if I didn't have that recent imagery.
Well, and you could share some waypoints with me.
I could share some points with with you. You're exactly right.
I mean, it has that
It
capability.
does have that sharing capability, which is great. You know, you're wanting to show me where your goblin turkeys are.
Oh, man. You know, Onyx, it's a great app.
It's a great app.
So guys can go to onyxmaps.com/hunt and use code Mossy Oak to get 20% off.
There you go.
I'm a big fan of Onyx.
I am too.
I've got one more. So growing up in Mississippi, I mean, hearing folks seeing bears on trail cameras and things like that, I hear a lot of negatives about bears. Oh, they're just a big raccoon. Oh, they're doing this. What are some positives? Because, I mean, I would think as a deer hunter, you're like, oh, I don't want them killing my fawns. Or as a turkey hunter, oh, they're going to kill my turkeys. What are some positives that bears do to keep, I guess, play their part in the ecosystem?
Well, I mean, what I tell people, what a lot of people don't know, is about 90% of a bear's diet is plant matter. And, you know, they're not a major predator to fawns. They're not a major predator to deer, to turkey. Well, that too, but, to turkey poults and that kind of thing. So that's sort of a myth that's out there that the bears are chasing all those things down. One universal thing that I can say that is probably a positive is they will absolutely seek out and destroy a yellow jacket nest.
Whoa, come on.
Bring it.
Yeah.
I had a
That's interesting.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine in the Delta that so I had one sent me a video of a bear actually digging. He's just got this cloud of yellow jackets around his face and head, and as he's digging, you can just
he's bearing with it.
Yeah, he's just like as hard as and finally he has enough and bolts off from it. But I had another buddy that sent me or that told me about this. He said he was clearing trails or whatever, accidentally found a yellow jacket nest, got popped a few times, and he went back to get poison and come back, and by the time he got back, there was a bear that had found that nest and dug it all up, and the nest was completely destroyed.
I guess they're eating larvae?
Yeah. They're seeking out larvae.
Wow. Interesting.
We always find, like on tree protectors, if there's a wasp that builds a nest in there, raccoons and coyotes and foxes and things will chew on the tree protector to try to eat the wasp larvae. So
it must be delicious is all I can say.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take that kind of punishment.
I hadn't tasted it lately.
They're also really good kleptoparasites. So they like to, meaning they steal scavenging sites from other animals. So we used to have a hard time with it when we'd be putting out roadkill deer to try to like locate an area where we were going to be able to trap bobcats and coyotes. And as soon as the bears came up, they would be stealing those carcasses and moving them away. So they do some cleanup service too, as we mentioned.
That's interesting. So, Anthony, I'd like to go back to you 20 feet up a tree, sticking your head over in a hole.
Told you that was going to be the
I remember Hannah was running the mothers off and then doing her work. And I remember her telling Richie that, well, let's keep an eye on mamas over there. I can see her moving in. Are you running mama off or are you sedating mama?
Ideally, we're sedating mama. We're sedating her in the den. And I'll give you a good example why. We had one sow that abandoned a cub in the South Delta this year. And it's extremely rare, but in 20 years, I think this is maybe the second or third event ever. But it does happen from time to time. And what we were able to do was, Dr. Morin's grad student was in on this and helped also. But we were able to take that bear out of the old den that the sow had abandoned, and actually transplanted that cub to a Southwest Mississippi sow that already had 3 cubs, and she took it and raised it as her own. And I've since then gotten pictures of that sow that with all 4 cubs after they've emerged out of the den. And so in that case, the best case scenario is you sedate the sow, she stays in the den, you introduce that 4th cub, and then she wakes up and she just goes back to caring for cubs.
Thought I had 3. Look at there. Must have slept good.
There's a biologist I worked with in another state who just used to always say, bears can't count.
that's great.
Oh, wow. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, to go back to your story, your question, we try to make sure the sow stays in there, because one thing I want to do, if nothing else, is we want to monitor her. So we're taking temperature, pulse, respiration. We're running her on supplemental oxygen. And we're also, I want to look at that collar. I want to make sure it's functioning right. There's no problems with it. I want to make sure it's fitting well. And you can't do that if you've run her off to somewhere else. And so that's my objective is, like, best case scenario is we dart her in the den. She stays there. We get the cubs, do our thing, put them back. Everybody wakes up and goes back to normal.
Why am I surprised, though, that she's not more aggressive towards you? when you poke your head in that hole?
It can be kind of a personality thing. Like there's one in the Delta that just absolutely hates us, and I've been 50 feet up a tree twice, in the same tree actually. She'd been in the same tree twice, and she just hates to see us coming, and she'll huff and blow and slap the side of the tree and get rowdy. But I mean, in general, bears don't want conflict. You know, they're a lot of times, you know, most of the time when you first make that eye contact, they're going to turn away. You know, they just want you to go away, and they want to go back to what they're doing.
Eye contact, yeah.
Yeah, the idea of like a mama bear and her cubs is a really kind of cultural thing, not a biological thing.
Yeah. If there's anybody that should be attacked and killed because of a mama bear and cubs, it should be the bear biologists around the country.
Yeah.
There should be none left by now.
Yeah, that's true.
But we should probably also take the time right here to point out, if you're Clyde, if you're listening, or
Clyde,
you know, if you see a den, you don't need to go stick your head in there.
I wouldn't stick my head in there.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I mean,
call these guys.
Yeah, and the thing that I try to tell people is, you know, we try to balance that between, you know, they're not the cartoon Disney characters that you've seen where they're warm and cuddly, and they're not the, you know, the mindless monsters that are going to eat your kids and dogs. They're wild animals. Any wild animal can be dangerous.
Yeah.
You know, they're not overly confrontational or aggressive, but any wild animal can be dangerous. And so it's important to, you know, give them their space and respect. Obviously, don't approach bears or anything like that. But you know, it's like any other wild animal. They don't want any kind of conflict, and usually they're gonna. A lot of times they'll move away before you even knew they were there.
Almost all the bears I've seen in my life is their butts as they're running away from me. So like, yeah.
How big do they get in Mississippi? Like, is there a biggest one or a top 3 average? Or
Yeah, the biggest one that we have on record was 468, and that one was in Wilkinson County. I can't remember, it's 5 or 10 years ago. And so the biggest two that we caught last summer, there was one 381 and one 384, and then there was one in Claiborne County that just recently got hit by a car that was 411.
And are those males or females?
All males, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, males are a lot bigger than females.
How about that? Lanny, you went to Alaska one time.
And,
actually, so guys, Lanny and I both killed bears.
Oh.
Yes.
Lanny killed his on the far west side of
that's right.
of the North America, and I killed one on the far east side of North America.
That's a heck of a range. I never
What'd
thought
your
about
bear
that.
weigh?
I have no earthly idea. You know, we were in them like in the middle of nowhere with no scales.
Yeah.
I think mine was probably a little more of a hunt than yours was, you know, as typically goes on.
No, I mean, I had to. It was exciting. I really enjoyed it. Though.
No, we were way away from everything else. Up in the Yetna and the Susitna rivers.
But I don't think.
Where was yours from?
Newfoundland.
Oh, wow, yeah. Now you're up in my area, yeah.
Yeah, it was way. I mean, it was, you know, just seeing the bear in the woods was just so exciting. And this thing was jet black. But my point was, I don't think my bear came anywhere close to 400 pounds.
Oh, I know the one I would killed wasn't 400
There's
pounds.
a ton of variability across the range, both in coat color. You were talking about the jet black, but also just in size. And it's really interesting. Like, you know, I was just in North Carolina last week with my bear project up there. They have they go back and forth with Pennsylvania for the largest black bears harvested, and it's like 700 bordering on 800 pounds for the bears they keep pulling out of there. You go 2 hours north from there and a little bit west into the Central Appalachian Mountains, we were getting our max bears were like 300 pounds. So there's something going on, right? That has to do with like kind of like how they were isolated and the genetics, but also it's not just going to be food related or like a regional gradient. There's something that goes on where you've got these pockets of really, really large bears and then pockets of smaller bears as well.
So when they've got these big bodies, do they have big heads where they score well? Like, if, you know, when you score a bear for Pope and Young or something like that?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I've been around a whole lot more bears that I was trying to keep alive than dead bears.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in general, the heads are pretty proportional. I haven't looked at a whole lot of trophy bears, like as far as the skull measurements and stuff.
Yeah.
But I would imagine I know that there's a few out there. That 468 was probably a Pope and Young, if not a Booner. And then, and like I said, there's some out there that I know of right now. There's one in the Delta that I have very little doubt would go 500 pounds.
Wow. He's a hoss.
Yeah,
Yeah.
big boy. So
That's cool.
there's a few here and there that I'd really like to trap.
So yeah, well, thank you for saying that, because that reminds me. I wanted to ask you. You're trapping some bears, and it looks to me like, and you mentioned we've got a relationship with these with Jack at Wildlife Dominion, and he's just an expert at figuring out how to build a trap and so you're doing some. Can you explain some of that?
So we have to rewind back before I was the bear biologist. I was the nuisance species biologist, and that's for, let's see, 8 out of the 9 years that I've been with wildlife and fisheries. That's been my primary concern, and wild hogs being chief amongst those. And so I've done a lot of trapping. I've used automated camera systems and was very familiar with all that technology before going into the bear program. And the first time that we used one of those camera systems was back in 2019 during the flood. And so we had several bears that were pushed up on the levee there. They the bear program at the time wanted to catch and collar a few. And so, we thought, well, it would be really cool if we could just kind of, watch from a distance, monitor everything, and then, kind of schedule out when we caught the bears and all that. And so that sort of, we used it then. It worked really well. And then one of the first things I did when I came into the program was to try to take that same technology and integrate it into some kind of trap for bears. And as far as I know, there's nobody else that's done that. And it's, the obvious things are you have control over the situation. Sometimes you're trapping. I mean, a lot of the traps that I've set up have been 2 or 3 hours a drive for me. So something that I can remotely monitor and something I don't have to go check every single day is obviously a huge game changer. But you can also select for specific individuals. So if there's one bear, with a collar you want to catch, or if there's one bear you want to avoid, if you're only trying to catch sows with cubs, whatever the case is, you can completely select for that situation. And you can, there was a sow with 2 cubs not long ago, and I was able to catch just the sow and leave they were actually yearlings, leave them outside. Or I could have caught all 3, or whatever the case was. So it makes it safer for the bear, because I'm not going to accidentally catch a bear when I don't want to. I know exactly when I caught it, and I've got full control of that situation. So back in August, it was 100 plus degrees.
I was going to say, you have to tell them when you built the trap.
Well, that's a whole nother story. I donated a lot of blood and sweat to that trap. But so I finished the trap up in August. We took it out. I caught my first big male bear. We worked him up. And the next day we had a sow and a cub that was in there at 11:30 a.m. So it's 98 plus degrees outside. There's no way that I can catch that sow and safely work her up. And she's an hour drive from me. So what I was able to do was pass on her. I actually passed on her twice. She came in and out of the trap, none the wiser. And so I was able to catch up with that same sow and cub later in October, safely trap her and put a collar on her. But if I had accidentally caught her in like a regular manual trap with some kind of trigger, best case scenario is I would have had to let her out, and now I've just created a trap shy bear. So if I'm trying to catch bears, specifically sow, because they give us more valuable information, there's more and more benefits as as I've gone down and kind of seen how well this has worked out.
Yeah, with the manual traps, we would have just had to close those traps because we wouldn't be able to trap when it's that hot out.
It's one of those big barrels that's on a trailer, and you can roll it wherever you need to, and then
we do have those. Those are called culvert traps, and that's what Dana's talking about. But this one is called a Cambrian style trap, and it's steel tubing, 1 and 1.5 inch steel tubing, and it's all welded 1/2 inch expanded metal. And so that was another thing. You've got complete airflow through the whole thing, and the camera and battery and wiring and all that is built into the trap, and it's mounted on a trailer. So you've still got the mobility of being able to pull a 5x8 trailer with a truck or a side by side or something like that. But you've got it's more expansive, and so it doesn't feel as confining as a culvert trap is. And then you've got the benefit of complete airflow. If there's a breeze, they're going to catch every bit of it going through. And if you're 300 pound and you're wearing a black fur coat, that can be pretty important.
Yeah. Breeze would be nice.
Yeah, heat is a big concern when you're trapping bears in the summertime.
Yeah, I would think so.
Wow. So that's the trap that you would use. Just say that there was a nuisance bear, a problem bear, and you'd get him in that culvert trap, and then you could haul him somewhere. I guess we were talking about relocating them maybe, but is that the kind of trap you would use for that?
I mean, it's the kind of trap that I prefer to use, period. Just because, like I said, with a culvert trap, you can set and we're using cellular cameras with a lot of those, so you can monitor them. but you have no control over when the bear actually goes in and gets trapped. But with this, like I said, I've got complete control. And so, and I'm actually going to be building another one here pretty soon. I'll have 2, hopefully more than that. I'll get a real metal fabricator to make the rest of mine, but, cause I've had enough of it. But, anyway, but yeah, I mean, nuisance bears or any others, it's versatile in any role that you need to catch a bear, especially a nuisance, because if you're looking for a specific bear and there's multiple bears in the area, then you can avoid catching them and just select for the one that you're looking for.
Yeah.
So the other type of trapping we'll do sometimes, but is when that's so much more convenient, is we will use what's called an aldridge snare. So in areas where you can't get a cambrian trap or a culvert trap in, then that's the other option. So a lot of places in the Northeast, up in the mountains, that's where you're going to end up snaring the bears again. But again, we put transmitters on them. So we have to go out and monitor the transmitters, just like telemetry. So they tell us when they've gone off and you have to be on it right away. And then if it gets too hot, you have to close everything down. And so it's much more convenient to be able to, much more effective.
Yeah,
long
see what's
term.
going on.
So when you put a collar on a bear, it seems like if he didn't want that collar, it seemed like he could pop it off.
There's a really fine line between having it tight enough where they're likely to stay on and not having them too tight, because, a bear can gain up to 30% of its body weight getting ready for denning. Mm-hmm. So you have to take that into account. If you're trapping bears in the summertime, that might be a different looking bear, come December. And so it can be sort of a fine line between, getting it tight enough and not too tight. But what I've kind of seen is it kind of comes down to the personality of the bear. If you put on the bear and the collar fits correctly, if that bear wants that collar off bad enough, that you get ready to go pick it up. Mm-hmm. But we've had pretty low collar, problems, slip collars and that kind of thing. Most of the time, if they're going to slip a collar, it's going to be within that first 24, 48 hours, and then after that, they kind of get used to it, and it's sort of like wearing anything else. You just kind of don't feel it after a while.
Mm-hmm. A little bling.
Yeah.
I get a biggest kick out of this Mississippi Black Bear Facebook page, because people, they've got to where they recognize different bears and hey, he's here now, and they've got so much personality, and it's just interesting to watch and to see the comments. And then I follow some things that you've posted, Anthony, and it doesn't look like people read your comments. It looks like they jump to a lot of conclusions.
There is some of that, but that kind of goes back to the point. We're sort of in a unique position, in my opinion. Most people have their solidified opinions about deer or about turkey or about other wildlife things. Snakes is another good example. And I feel like bears, there's a larger percentage of people that don't really have a hard opinion one way or another. And there's a little bit more opportunity to be preemptive in the way that we, present our educational stuff versus just trying to react after somebody has, encountered a bear, or, it's never a big deal to you until there's a bear on your back porch. And then all of a sudden you want to know how to deal with it. And so what we're trying to do is just introduce as much of that stuff as we can, sort of slowly, and the Mississippi Black Bear page has been a really good avenue for that, to sort of just slowly chip away and create a more and more educated environment on the page.
The Furminator is the industry's most versatile piece of food plot equipment, allowing plotters to do every step of the process, working the soil, adding seed and soil supplements, and compacting, from start to finish with a single implement. It's hassle-free by design. Set it for the seed size and simply drive the tractor, and the Furminator does the rest. Check it out at thefurminator.com.
Hey guys, Dudley from Gamekeepers here. I want to tell you about the all-new Gunner Dog Bowl. It's designed for home and built for travel. It's customizable, leak-resistant, light on weight, solid on durability, and rust-proof. Like other Gunner products, they're made in Nashville and designed for everywhere.
Nosler's known for their bullets, and now they're making suppressors. Nosler suppressors are made for hunting. Adding a Nosler suppressor to your rifle will make you a quieter, more accurate, and more effective hunter. Protect your hearing and disturb less game with a Nosler suppressor. The time to hunt quiet is now. Learn more at nosler.com.
What else we need to ask, Lanny?
I have one more question that I have to ask, and it's a little off topic. But I have to ask this, and you might have to take your Mississippi State hat off or your MDWFP hat off, but in all of these river bottoms and these big trees and climbing up in this stuff, any evidence or any sightings of any long-tailed cats.
So what's amazing to me is the amount of times I've heard black bears and black panthers mentioned in the same sentence. It's like I've got, somebody sent me game camera pictures of a bear.
Yeah.
Okay, you definitely got a bear. Oh, and we also got panthers. You want to come trap them too?
Yeah.
And it's like we're talking about just two different options here. It's amazing to me. But and Dana and I were talking about this before. If there are cougars, black panthers, long-tailed cats of any variety in the state of Mississippi, I want to be the first to know.
Me too.
But as biologists and as scientists, we rely on the data. And if there's any kind of proof out there that's credible, I want to see it. But so far,
And I'll just say I've worked in plenty of states where mountain lion populations are established, and we get them regularly on game cameras, and they are easy to identify. And I just haven't seen anything in this area that tells me that's the case.
I'm sorry, Anthony.
You knew it was coming.
I knew it was coming. But I thought
if that's the worst question you got,
I had somebody asking me if I was going to detect Sasquatch in our hair snares in North Carolina last week.
Hey, you never know. Bobby's on the Sasquatch.
Yeah, that's
trail.
the new kick, new rabbit hole.
He's chasing Bigfoot.
He divert the attention now down here.
I do have a question on the long-tailed cat. So a lot of the history about bears and when they were heavily hunted in the 1800s, you always heard, this person killed 17 bears, 3 panthers, 47 deer, and 30 turkeys that year. So, people were harvesting long-tailed cats in Mississippi and Louisiana and Arkansas. So when did that stop?
Do you know?
Oh, it's before they were extirpated from this area before black bears really were substantially reduced, but it was in the same efforts. Like, you think about Aldo Leopold, right, was a predator control biologist in New Mexico, removing mountain lions from that far west, right? They went after those pretty hard, pretty early on. So, the mountain lion population is definitely expanding. And we're starting to see, there was one that was recovered in Northwest Arkansas earlier this year.
Yep.
Nobody's denying that they couldn't show up here, or that we might occasionally get a long distance dispersal or a migratory movement, like we had one in Connecticut that was hit by a Land Cruiser in 2011, right? But that's not an established breeding population. I would say in the areas that I've worked where they're there, they're there. Like, you're seeing them. They're not as cryptic as people think they are. They're not camera shy. And if you're in an area where you're hunting with dogs, that's the way we trap them a lot of times, to collar them, as we tree them with hunting dogs. Yeah. So oftentimes I'm very curious why we're not treeing mountain lions if they're there.
So, I got one more thing. I'll quit. I'll quit after this.
Go ahead.
I'll quit after this. So we all, everybody talks about the mountain lion and everything else. Is there a chance that there could be another species of cat coming from the south?
So, like Dana said, there's verified sightings in Arkansas. There have been a handful of verified sightings in Louisiana. And like you said, is it possible that there is a cat? We just recently had bears that traveled 70 plus miles.
Yeah.
Is it possible that there was a cat that has come through Mississippi or whatever? It's possible.
Okay.
Is it probable, and is it often? No. And is it probable or likely that animal is black? No, absolutely.
What I saw was not black.
That is a huge myth. There actually is no identified black or melanistic variation of.
I never said black long-tailed cat, by the way. I just said
they all kind of go hand in hand.
I know that everybody. He pigeonholes me into the Black Panther thing all the time, and that's not what I'm talking about.
I am fascinated by all this.
Yeah, we are fascinated.
And about 15 years ago, we did an article in our Gamekeeper magazine about just people who had some anecdotal stories of seeing them. And it's just amazing. It's like it just strikes a chord with people. And you rarely talk to Anthony. You just rarely talk to somebody, and they don't say, "Well, man, my uncle saw one," and they just are just emphatic. And when we had the Fox Vest big party here, and there was thousands of people that overnighted out there, and we walked around talking to them, and just one after another talked about seeing panthers, and one guy told me a story about shooting
long-tailed cats.
It's just
and people get really attached to the idea too. They're very dedicated to trying to prove they're right, and it's to the extent that they'll go to some really incredible, lengths of effort. But so, for example, there was a state in the East where the fur bear and bear biologist was able to identify that there was somebody taking a mount of a mountain lion and moving it around the state and then taking pictures of it and sending it in as evidence. Why would you do that? I've had people. I had somebody in Virginia send me a picture of a mountain lion they'd gotten from a trail camera off the internet from a trail camera in California, and sent it to me to say, "See, they're here." And the reason I knew that it was from a trail camera in California is it was from one of my trail cameras when I worked in California, and there was a Torrey pine in the background, which is an endemic species to San Diego.
Right,
So it's really interesting to me. Like it can really pick up some steam, especially on social media and things like that. But I would say we're skeptical because we haven't seen anything really compelling yet. So
Sure.
I
Understand
think I would
that.
encourage
But
that.
it's part of our Southern culture to have these great stories, these great hunting stories. And, and I'll say the best part of hunting is getting ready to go hunting and talking about it. And then after the hunt, telling these great stories. And that's where a lot of this, I think, has gotten started, is people just embellishing the lore.
Well, I know what I saw, and that's all I'm telling y'all. And I'm going to show it to y'all.
Well, it was an otter.
Well, and that's what
This was not an otter.
That's what I tell people is, I don't argue with people about what they see. I don't tell you you didn't see what you said you did. I just, I say, hey, I'm all ears.
Yeah, I'm 100% with y'all on. I just love to talk about it because it's fascinating to me.
So another side note, really quick about mounts that made me think of this. So not long ago, and again, like I'm talking to landowners all the time.
Yeah.
Almost every day, I'll get a number. I'll get a picture from a number that I don't recognize. Just a picture of a bear, and that's it. Okay, cool. Thank
you.
Where are we going with this?
Yeah.
But anyway, so there was this WMA manager that was down in Copiah County, and he was sending me these pictures of this bear, daytime and nighttime pictures, in right around this guy's chicken houses. And maybe we're going to bring a trap down there. I'll talk to this guy. We're kind of going back and forth, and I looked at the daytime picture and I was like, that bear just looks really rough. Like, it's just not a good looking bear at all.
Oh, no.
And a few hours later, he texted me back. He said, hey, that was actually this guy's buddy putting a mount in front of his camera and having it take pictures. Sorry to bother you.
False alert.
Yep.
Wow. How about that? Wow. Well, look, why don't we, Mac, why don't we turn it over to you and let you do the trivia question. Richie?
Here we go.
Here we go.
The moment of truth.
Brought to you
I'm
by
so bad at this
Sheffield
game.
Financial. Fuel your
You're in good
gamekeeper
company.
projects with financing for power sports, outdoor power equipment, and trailers. Begin your next conservation adventure at SheffieldFinancial.com.
All right, so the guest winner this week is Butterbean. Who left us a really good review. Gave a shout out to Mr. Toxie.
Oh, did he? Wasn't there
That may be Toxie's mama doing that. Another one.
yeah, wasn't there an amateur? Yeah, there's a boxer or a tough man named Butterbean, or maybe an MMA guy.
You know what the prize is this week, Bobby?
That's a Spartan camera.
That's it.
Man, I love Spartan cameras. I have just set that stuff up on our 4-acre patch of Clover Plus, and let me tell you what the deer are piling in there.
You seeing some velvet?
Seeing a little bit of velvet.
Big
don't tell
velvet.
anybody. Don't tell anybody else. Yeah, it's happening. It's starting.
All right, so the question is, has there ever...
But hang on one second.
Wait just a minute, man.
So y'all can collaborate.
Oh, we have
here.
to.
Oh, yeah.
But you're playing for a podcast T-shirt.
Yeah.
And these things
Whoa.
are coveted. Everything. So,
We're about out of them, by the
yeah,
way.
I'm sorry, Mac. I had to get that in.
All right, so the question is, has there ever been a bear season in Mississippi?
So we're talking about a actually established
Hunting
season.
Yes.
Bear season opens next Saturday.
Would there have been one before, like, in the 1930s?
Well, and the question actually says in modern times, like from the 1950s to today.
So I know that they went on the federal endangered species list in '74.
Yeah.
And the estimates, I think the estimates in like the 40s.
It's like 12
30s.
bears.
Yeah, it was like a dozen bears. Yeah. So
But they wouldn't be necessarily protected.
I don't know when it would have been.
Yeah.
Well, they are really
They
thinking
think
this
that's
through.
talking it out.
Like
talking
going
it
through
out.
the timeline,
I like
trying
it.
to figure out where a season
I
might
liked
have
it.
fell. The only thing I could figure is like if it was like a holdover, where it was there were no bears, but there's still a season because it was, and then it was eventually done away with. But
Well, because I know some other states like North Carolina had a season early on, and then eventually, like in the 30s or so, when the agency or the commission started, and then we were like, okay, no more.
Yeah, we're going to have to call time at some point.
We're just stalling. Sorry.
I have a feeling it's wrong, but I'm gonna say no.
I would say no too, but I feel like he wouldn't have asked.
Right.
All right, got it.
All right, there's,
No.
yeah, and I went straight to Ricky Flint, and
There you
he
go.
said, "As far as I know, and as far as I can tell." And would you read the rest of that, Mac, please?
Yeah, so by the early 1900s, the bear numbers, there was a really sharp decline due to overhunting and habitat destruction. But in 1932, the black bear was given a statewide protection and was later included in the first list of rare and threatened vertebrae in Mississippi in 1974. And then in 84, the black bear was listed as an endangered species in the state of Mississippi, where it is today.
Thank you, Mac.
Good
Thank you,
answer.
Ma- and by the way, we have bear hunting history
Royalty.
royalty in here.
Yeah, Max.
Max, what was it?
It's my fourth great grandfather.
His fourth great grandfather.
I actually
Tell
have
us about
the
him.
gun
Was a bear hunter
that he used to harvest bears with.
in Mississippi too.
Yeah, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas.
And didn't just have one arm.
He did.
This is a tough dude now.
No kidding.
Yeah, he got it blown off in the war.
Yeah, in the war. So
How about that?
cool stuff.
Yeah, at some point we're going to get all that. There's a guy
It's
writing
a great,
story about that.
there's
Yeah.
write a story about Max, great
Grandfather. My, I guess you could say my namesake, George.
George.
Jorge.
Big Mac. Big Mac.
Look, we've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, this has been great.
But before we sign off, I always look around the room. Lanny, what did you learn?
I think there's a chance. That's all I'm saying.
That's what came out of the whole podcast. So you're telling me there's a chance.
Tell me
Don't
there's
feed
a
your
chance.
Mac, did you
No,
learn
I
anything?
learned a lot about it. It's very intriguing, honestly, the whole black bear subject in general.
I think it's cool to hear another conservation in action story going on right now. I mean, that we get to witness and be a part of and learn about. And I'm really looking forward to hearing the population projections that I would love for us to take guesses on this podcast and then circle back to see what that
That'd
comes out
be
to
a
be.
great
Don't-
activity.
Don't bias me, because by next summer we should have some good. Like
I really
some
want
ideas.
you to
Don't
take the
down.
guess so then I can guess after you.
Yeah.
I
I think there's more than we think they are.
I want to know
think
what
there's
y'all's
more.
guesses are.
Yeah, just
No, you don't.
just throw it out.
I also guess I'll put. I can put relative. We have really good population numbers in Louisiana because they've been intensively monitoring that population as part of the delisting process, and they have single populations where you have 700 or 800 bears. I think we're still less than half of that in Mississippi, is my guess.
So 350 to 400 somewhere in there.
Maybe. I'm really hesitant to put a
That's
true
your
number.
statewide?
Yeah.
300 to 400?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be more than that.
You think so?
Yeah.
Nice.
5-ish.
And by the way, you should all feel very privileged because this is the first time that I've ever even thrown a
I
number
can't-
out there.
I can't believe
Yes.
you're throwing a
If you really want to make a biologist
Love it.
squirm,
Yeah.
make him put any kind of number out there. that
Give
he's
a
not
finite
sure about.
number.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say something north of that. I don't know how much north, but I don't know. We'll
That's
see.
good.
Yeah, that's
That's really good.
sounds like they're growing.
What'd you learn, Dudley?
I gave
you a lot of time.
I learned a ton
You
of
gave him too
stuff,
much
Bobby.
time.
I learned a ton.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what I learned.
I just hope I have one show up at my little slice of heaven someday. On
Yeah,
on
that'd
a
be
camera.
neat to have one for
so
sure.
I tell you what I learned. Next time I see some donuts up in a tree,
You gonna-
I'm gonna be careful of that barbed wire. Right now.
That's right.
That's a pretty good quid pro quo, though. A bear gets a donut, but
not a bad
you lose
trade-off.
little
Yeah,
hair.
no, it gets
Yeah.
a little tough to hair taking. That
Are
ain't
there
too
any
bad.
donut shops we need to give a shout out to for all their donations?
Oh, Shipley's has been helping us lately.
Oh,
Okay.
go Shipley's.
Yep.
All right.
So the bear I killed in Newfoundland had a taste for donuts.
Oh, really? Did you have
Yeah.
some out there for him?
I didn't, but somebody prior to me getting there had a barrel full of them out there for 'em. That's the only odd thing about it.
It is, yeah.
It's very odd the way they do that.
Hunting over bait's really common in the Northeast. Yeah, it's actually because bear hunting's hard, right?
Yeah.
Like it's your success rate for stock and still hunting is incredibly low. So you think about a state like Maine, and your success rate's 1% to 2% for incidental. It's 7% for stock and still. It'll be 69% for hunting over bait. Right?
Wow.
Like, so in a population where you're really using harvest as a tool to manage that population, and you want to meet your objectives, that we look at things like hunting over bait and hunting with hounds to really improve our success rates.
Yeah, and another good thing about that, going back to Louisiana, the biologist there, his rationale was, if you have a bear that's around that concentrated food source for a longer time, then you're going to have more time to look. You're going to take a better shot and possibly maybe identify, sex and age a little better than a bear that's just passing through the woods. So,
yeah, hunting over bait's very common in a lot of areas. So.
Yeah, I'm not against it. I'm just saying it was just kind of a,
it's a different experience.
It was a different experience.
Yeah, for us.
It was, and I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah,
I certainly did. All right, guys. What is there anything else left unsaid? Is there anything that you guys came in here saying? I want to make sure I communicate this.
I mean, I would just kind of reiterate the fact that I'm just honored and privileged to be in the position as the bear program leader, because it's fairly likely that in my career there could possibly be a framework put together for a bear season, and to see that conservation success story, one of the last major conservation success stories of that species in the state of Mississippi, the same place that Teddy Roosevelt came over 100 years ago.
Great story.
I mean, that's just as cool as it gets.
Are we going to be able to?
I got a chill.
Yeah, you did.
Just thinking about that.
So the super cool bear print MDWFP decal, are those available anywhere?
Can we have some in my truck?
All right. I love it.
Trade you a t-shirt.
No problem.
All right.
And I'd say from the research side, it's equally as exciting, not just from bears, that like the opportunity to watch and naturally observe and document a naturally expanding population and recovering population is really exciting and rare. And it helps us understand a lot of things about not just bear population recovery and American black bear population recovery, but how that might extend across other species of bears internationally and other carnivore species across North America. It's really an exciting opportunity that they've set up here in Mississippi.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank y'all for being here. Nothing better than Mississippi State and MDWFP,
That's
in my
right.
opinion, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think wildlife is just the winners here with you guys and y'all's passion for what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks for what y'all do. 100%.
Yeah, it really is. Richie, you got anything to add? Can you trump that in any way with anything?
No, I believe you guys have taken care of everything there. So no, we're good.
I do know I'm as hungry as a bear right now.
What was the word?
Hypophagia.
Hypophagia is kicking in, that's for sure.
Oh, that's good. Well, thank y'all for being here, and we appreciate everybody listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
We really do. And the television show is.
Please leave a review.
Yeah.
Well, you
tune in to the
pretty good
television
chance
show.
you'll win a prize.
Win a prize.
If you leave a review. So, guys, we've really enjoyed this. So, why don't you say goodbye, Dudley?
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, Richie.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast, and be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.